Hello, I'm Burt Lancaster. On the 8th of October, 1941, the war between Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia had been underway for almost 4 months. On that day, Hitler's propaganda minister, Joseph Goebbels, broadcast from Berlin that Moscow had fallen. Hitler's troops, he said, could see the Kremlin towers from their front lines. Another 4 or 5 days, and the swastika flag would fly over the Kremlin. Germany believed these reports, so did many others. After all, Hitler had conquered Western Europe. He had blitzed London. But here, in this area, some 16 miles from the Kremlin, and commemorated by these symbolic anti-tank obstacles, the Nazi blitzkrieg came to an end. Here, in the Moscow suburbs, the Red Army and hundreds of thousands of ordinary men, women, and children threw up barriers which the Nazi tanks could not crack. Here the tide was turned in the unknown war on the Eastern Front. On November 7th, as always, the Soviet Union celebrated its national holiday. Stalin addressed the troops in Red Square and then watched as Red Army units paraded past him through the snow and onto the front. In early December, the Red Army counterattacked. They pushed back Hitler's armies as far as 125 miles from Moscow. It was the first time in the Second World War that the mighty Nazi Wehrmacht was stopped. Our story, the battle for Moscow.
Moscow, the heart of Russia. Moscow, where modern Russia began, where Vladimir Lenin lived and worked and planned the development of the Soviet state, and where his body lies for eternity. The Kremlin, the nerve center of the Soviet Union. From here, the Stavka, the Soviet High Command, directed the unknown war. In 1941, its bright towers and gold onion domes were daubed with gray-green paint, camouflage against the Nazi bombers. Anti-aircraft guns put up a barrage from the roof of the Moscow Hotel. In the summer of 1941, Moscow took on the look of war. On June 22nd, Hitler had launched Operation Barbarossa with the intention of annihilating the Soviet Union, occupying the motherland of Russia, and exterminating her people. It was to be an epic battle. But the people of Moscow, sending their husbands, sons, and brothers to the front, still hoped that the war would be a short one. Yesterday, life in Moscow had been normal. People were thinking about their vacations, enjoying the welcome warmth of the summer. The Bolshoi was completing its season, with the great ballerina Ulanova dancing. now suddenly all that changed. By mid-July, the Wehrmacht had already covered half the distance to Moscow, Hitler's prime target. The Nazis were jubilant. In less than a month following the road Napoleon had taken, they had come within striking distance of Smolensk, 235 miles west of Moscow. Systematically, they isolated unit after unit of the Red Army. They thought the war would be a short one. Vienna, Prague, Brussels, The Hague, Copenhagen, Oslo, Paris, Belgrade, Warsaw lay behind them. Moscow would be next. In July, the first serious air raids came to Moscow, and with them a growing awareness of danger. More anti-aircraft guns were mounted, and the defenses were dug, the women alongside the men. At Smolensk, the Red Army was fighting with all its strength to protect Moscow. Some German tank crews were attacked so furiously that they could not open their turret hatches. Even Hitler was forced to acknowledge what he called the savage determination of the Russian infantry. The battle in and around Smolensk itself lasted 10 weeks. 10 Soviet divisions were caught in the Smolensk pocket. They made the Germans fight for every city block. Much of it destroyed, Smolensk was in German hands by the beginning of September. Its defense had bought time, but at fearful cost to the Red Army. At the end of the month, the German High Command assessed the total Russian losses over all the front at 2.5 million men, 22,000 guns, 18,000 tanks, and 12,000 aircraft. Almost exactly the figures for the total Russian strength the Nazis had thought they would have to face and to overcome to win the war. German intelligence had blundered. The Russians were fighting as hard as ever, and Moscow was still over 200 miles away. By now, the air assault on Moscow had begun in earnest, delivered by the same squadrons that had bombed London, Liverpool, Warsaw, Rotterdam, and Belgrade.